Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be discussing private home care options that are available in Ontario and some of the benefits of managing your own care. So first, let's describe what home care is. And in Ontario, home care is administered through the Ministry of Health, and it's basically services like PSW care / attendant care or even nursing care that are needed for people with disabilities that have either a chronic condition or a temporary condition but need assistance in day-to-day tasks. This is usually meant for people with disabilities or people who are elderly and need help with things like personal care, bathing, meal prep, things that they can't do independently for themselves. Well, why is this important? Well, with the aging population as it stands, with all the baby boomers becoming senior citizens and needing more care and more resources, especially if they want to age at home, and the rising population overall means that there are more and more people that rely on home care services to help supplement the care that they need from their family or their friends or their community. The problem with home care in Ontario, though, is the way it's administered through many of these home care agencies that are problematic to say the least. In fact, CBC did a whole segment about how businesses like Bayshore and Paramed are just awful to deal with because they're a for-profit company that really doesn't give a shit about their patients. In the CBC Marketplace segment, which I'll link in the description, they go through all of the different reasons why these companies are basically not incentivized to properly care for patients, to properly care for their staff. It's really kind of a mechanism to just make as much money as possible by putting a worker in a home and not caring about the worker and not caring about the home and the client in any way. And so many people become discouraged that that is the only home care option that people have in Ontario. There are alternatives to agency care. For instance, if you seek out PSW or attendant services through not-for-profits or charities, it's usually called an attendant outreach program. And what they do is they provide you the PSW in your home, but they're generally better programs because A, the PSW is paid more money, and B, there's more consistency in the staffing that are put in your home. So there's not always new staff that come in and out. There's usually the same PSWs. There's more consistency about the staff that's in your home. There isn't that much higher turnover because the staff are treated better and the patients are treated better and they have an overall better environment than you will find with any agency care. There's also a concept called supportive housing, which is usually done by not-for-profits or charities as well. Sometimes they're also done through the city, where you essentially have your own apartment, including your own kitchen, your own living space and stuff, but you have 24-hour PSW support in the lobby. So essentially it's like a concierge service for people with disabilities by having somebody that you can call 24/7 if anything sort of happens. But there is a downside to that because even though there are PSWs in the building, you still have to schedule the care that you need in terms of if you need it in the morning, what time you need it in the afternoon, so on and so forth. They only really come up from the lobby to assist with things if there's an emergency, and they have a very narrow definition of what an emergency is. I'm now going to play you a clip from an interview I've had with Emma from Whimble. She is the owner of Whimble, explain how one of her clients who lives in supportive housing, the type of difficulty she's experiences when having to schedule emergency services from her building.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Hebek. My name is Emma Brown and I'm the founder of Whimble. My goal with Whimble is to basically create a safety net or a plan B or some sort of backup system so that everybody who relies on care, whatever care means to the individual, can access a backup caregiver in the event that their routine support system fails. So We're kind of like an Uber for personal care attendants, you can describe us as. Where on one side we have a supply pool of attendants, PSWs, caregivers who are looking to pick up extra shifts and earn extra income. And then on the other side, we have individuals and events in need of personal care assistance. So whether it's an individual who has an urgent need, like a very critical need, like an incontinence episode, or a morning worker is canceled and they can't get out of bed, or whatever the case is, or they have like a short to medium term gap in their care, like someone's going on holidays or someone's sick or whatever life throws at you, you can place requests to get those gaps filled in your care schedule. And then we also support events and encourage them to hire personal care attendants to support any guests, volunteers, staff with disabilities who might need personal care assistance at the event. I'd say there's so many different stories over the past few years where we've been able to get care to someone who wouldn't have otherwise been able to access. A couple stories that come immediately to mind are, for context, for anyone listening to or watching the video who doesn't know about supportive housing, like, I think the province has kind of had a mandate to encourage supportive housing where individuals live in apartment buildings that are staffed with agencies on site. And in my conversations with policymakers involved in the home care space, that has kind of been seen as like the gold standard of what people can expect in terms of care, because you technically have 24/7 access to on-site support. You live in an accessible unit. Great. Sounds great in theory, but from what I've seen in my experience with Whimble, the individuals, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Beck, but the individuals who we support who live in these buildings, yes, they're mostly getting their like basic needs met, but your care is put in like a very defined box of like, based on a doctor's prescribed care plan, this is what the agency will help you with. And if you need anything outside of that box, you're on your own. And if you need anything outside of your apartment building, you're on your own. So yes, your needs are met in specific circumstances, but as soon as you need something slightly outside that box, like getting your nails trimmed or dyeing your hair or going to pick up something from the post office beside your building, like as soon as you need anything slightly outside of the scope of your care plan, they won't support you. So we did have one client who, this was like a really silly example, but her care plan doesn't include pet care. So she has a cat and her agency says, we're not responsible for your cat. But like, that's part of her activities of daily living is feeding and taking care of her cat. And she, I'm trying to remember the story, but she was working at her desk and she was drinking a smoothie and the smoothie fell on the ground and went everywhere. So she was like, if I move, my wheels are going to get covered in smoothie. This is going to be a mess. So she called down to her 24/7 support and said, I need help cleaning up this smoothie that's all over my floor. Like I'm literally trapped by smoothie. And they called back and said, no, we think your cat knocked over the smoothie. So that's considered pet care and we're not going to help you clean it up. So like, just like crazy. And that's obviously a bit of an extreme situation, but like, we have so many instances like that where someone's just needed a little bit of extra care and the system has not been able to accommodate, and like they're just not able to get what their needs met.
So those are basically the two main options in terms of using other services for your home care support, whether you want to use attendant outreach programs or supportive housing. Both are, valid for many reasons. But if you are capable, or you have a family member who's capable of managing your own care, I'm going to talk about two programs in Ontario that provide you the funding to hire and manage your own staff, whether it's the person with disability themselves who's managing their staff, or if it's a caregiver or a family member who lives with them. There are options that you can bypass organizations, whether it be not-for-profits or whether it be these home care agencies. The first program I'm going to talk about is direct funding, and it's a program that is administered through the Center for Independent Living, which is in Toronto. But I think this Center for Independent Living is also nationwide. So there are certain programs in different provinces running, I think, certain levels of direct funding in different capacities. But I'll speak about Ontario. And this program, what they do is they give the individual with disability the money to hire and manage your own care. So that means you find the attendants, which is basically PSWs, but they call attendants. You find your attendants, you train them, you hire them, you do payroll, you deduct taxes, everything that involves with kind of running an agency, but you're just running your own care and your own services. But you are a manager, and you are managing everything as a regular employer would. You're just cutting out the middleman of these agencies and these HR staff and these schedulers and all those other people you have to deal with if you were dealing with an organization. It is all on you to find your coverage, find your care, and manage it yourself. So I'm now going to play you a clip from an interview I did with Gigi, who's the director of the London, Ontario chapter of the Center for Independent Living, and some of the amazing attributes that this program has given to individuals all throughout the province.
So my name is Gigi. I'm the executive director at the Independent Living Center, London and area. I'm also the direct funding coordinator at the center as well. A little bit about our organization. We started off 30 years ago. Actually, it's our 30th year anniversary this year in February. We've been in Canada for 40 years, and the independent living movement has been around since 1975 in North America. It's expanded all across North America and into Europe as well, actually. A little bit more about our organization. We're a not-for-profit, and we're dedicated to supporting individuals with disabilities. Our mission at the ILCLA in London is to help people lead independent lives, providing them with essential services, resources, and a strong community support. So direct funding is a government-administered program. Each province has direct funding. In Ontario, it looks a little bit different, so you might be familiar with it if you're from different provinces. But in Ontario, direct funding is administered by Ontario Health, and then Toronto, the SILT office, manages all of direct funding for Ontario. Direct funding is a service that allows individuals with a physical disability to be able to access a certain amount of funding to cover their needs for attendant services. So these services include, transferring in and out of bed, using the bathroom bowel routines, showering, your main attendant needs. And then on top of that, it would supplement with a little bit of home cleaning, like light home cleaning, meal prep, if you need assistance eating, respiratory equipment support, things like that to support you in your day-to-day essential services. It's not a one or the other. It's not a, okay, I'm able to, bathe myself, etc., but I do need the housekeeping services. It starts with your essential day-to-day, and then the housekeeping, laundry, cooking comes on top of that. A little bit more about direct funding. I think sometimes we get the question on, you say physical disability, are other disabilities disqualified from it? What does that mean? When I say physical disability, our main focus, the program supports is physical disabilities. Why? It's a good question, a self-asked question. But the main reason that it's based around physical disability is because you're becoming your own employer. You're becoming a self-manager. So an individual that needs attendant services for the main areas of essential day-to-day living, we would be putting a lot of responsibility on this individual to manage their own day-to-day care. This means they should be living independently or with family, but they're able to manage their care. They're able to hire, fire, they're able to manage their budget, etc. So someone with a developmental disability wouldn't necessarily be able to do this, right? They're already vulnerable, and we're putting someone at more risk of being sued or having different things go wrong. So hence it's focused around physical disabilities. You can have sensory disabilities, neurological disabilities on top of that, but physical disabilities is the primary area that direct funding covers. We're with you for life, like I had mentioned. From the age of 16, and why 16 is another question I get. Do you really want a 14-year-old or a 10-year-old managing their own budget and finances and reporting to CRA? Probably not. So from the age of 16 onwards, you're able to manage your own care, which is not offered through different agencies. And your services travel with you. So if you go from home care and you decide to move to Winnipeg, or you decide to move outside of even your region, you have to reach out to the partner association if it is in the region, if it is in that rural community or city, or their counterpart, what would be a similar agency, and then request services be put on either a wait list or reset up those services. That doesn't happen with direct funding. In direct funding, we cover all of Ontario, all the rural areas. So whether you moved from Windsor to London, from Toronto all the way down to Thunder Bay or Sudbury, your services stay with you. You would just be changed with the center, but your budget stays the same, it stays with you. You would hire your own attendants where you go. Now, if you decided to move from province to province, same thing. We are a nationwide organization. So we would connect you to that organization and you would be transferred internally. It's not something that you have to now reset or figure out the counterpart to. Another beautiful thing about direct funding and why I think it's better is it really does focus on empowering you and for you to have control over how you live your life. Have you heard of another organization where you can travel with your attendant services? Travel with direct funding outside of the country, not just Ontario, but outside the country for up to 3 weeks. And I think that's a very unique and incredible feature. Something else that's very unique to direct funding is that you can have nurturing assistance. I don't think your ability to be a mom or your ability to be a father or a parent or a caregiver should be limited just because you have a disability. And I think it's very important and very enriching that direct funding feels the same way, that the program highlights that. And I think it's one of the only programs that allows a nurturing assistance. So you can be a parent to a newborn. You can be a parent to a young child that needs you, and you're trying to be there for them.
Now, with being your own manager, there is some realities that I really do want to discuss because I've been actually on this program since 2006 and I think it's amazing. It is the only reason I've been able to continue with my education, both with my bachelor's and my master's degree. It's the only reason I've been able to live independently my entire adult life. Like, I could not sing the praises of direct funding more than I think the founders of the program. But there are some realities that we need to discuss. First and foremost, if there's any staffing issues, that is your problem, and that is something that you as a manager have to deal with. That is also something that if you have an unexpected emergency with your staff and there's like gaps in your coverage, you have to deal with as well. You have to problem solve and you have to be the boss, and you kind of have to boss up. And so, and for some people that can be hard to manage and to problem solve and to constantly stay on top of scheduling, staying on top of payroll, staying on top of reports. Like, it is essentially a part-time job and you have to treat it like a part-time job. But with anything that is that much work, the benefits always outweigh the negative. Another program that I want to talk about is the Ontario Health at Homes program that they've had since 2018 called Home and Family Managed Care Program. And essentially, it's very similar to direct funding, but it has two main things that are differentiation from the other program. One is that not only do they do PSW support, is that they also do nursing support as well. And for me, I've been on this program since 2019, and I've used it for my overnight nursing because I have a G-tube and a BiPAP, and so I require overnight nursing support. Another important differentiation is that unlike direct funding, family managed home care does allow the caregiver of the person with disability, whether it be a parent, a spouse, any type of like guardian, to be their substitute decision maker, and therefore they can allow a family member to manage the services for them rather than the person with disability themselves managing their services and managing their care. And the reason being is that direct funding was started on the independent living movement, and so they emphasize the person with disability managing their own care, whereas family managed home care recognizes that sometimes the person with a disability doesn't have the capabilities to manage their care and therefore allows somebody within their family to do it for them. And this program, because it's either you or your family that is managing your care, because you're given the funding directly, you're given the money directly, and it's your job to find the staff, train the staff, hire them, and all of the things it requires of being a manager and being a boss, it's still a part-time job. And it's a lot to juggle, but it gives you a lot of freedom because with both programs, you get to choose who you work with rather than the agency choosing for you who you work with. And also with direct funding and with Family Managed, but more so with direct funding, there is a flexibility of having your staff come at times that you want them to be there rather than sometimes with agency care or with supportive living, you have to fit in the slots that they have available for staff, whereas with these programs, you decide what time your staff comes, how long they're there for, and as long as within your budget, you are allowed to do whatever you want and move things around and have the flexibility to manage your own care. And so that gives people a lot more freedom than I think a structured agency or a charity or not-for-profit would have. But again, it's a part-time job, it's a lot of time commitment, it's a lot of energy, but anything that is worth doing does take a lot of effort, and that's something you have to take into consideration. I'll leave a link to both programs in the description, and if you need home care services or you know somebody who does, I highly suggest checking out these programs and applying it. You will not regret it. And that's it for today's video. If you found the information helpful, I would love it if you would like, share, subscribe, turn on notifications, and I will see you next week.